I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. On the Senate floor Tuesday, Senator Dick Durbin voiced his support for the CHIPS Act. This bipartisan bill, which the Senate will vote on Tuesday, will support the rebuilding of the U.S. semiconductor industry. Durbin described the legislation as, quote, critical to our economy and national security. The Senate Majority Whip also claimed, quote, it will provide billions of dollars to boost our domestic semiconductor manufacturing industry. Listen in as the Illinois Democrat explains.
Mr. President, I listened to the senator from South Dakota, my friend, and I think he has fairly set out the Republican agenda. Take the Trump tax cuts, the cuts that appeared during the Trump administration for the wealthiest people in America, and make them permanent. That's his idea of an economic boost that America needs. It's not mine. My idea is to try to address the challenges which working families in America face today, the challenges which many people in America of limited means face today. I think that the tax code should be written with those people in mind, not with the wealthiest people in mind, which the Republicans did when we pushed through Trump tax cuts with the opposition of Democrats. So what are we proposing that was characterized yesterday by the Republican minority leader as socialistic? Well, what we're proposing is trying to bring some fairness when it comes to prescription drug pricing. Ask Americans about the cost of living. They'll certainly talk to you about gasoline and food and prescription drugs, particularly our seniors. It was ironic yesterday that after the senator from Kentucky on the Republican side called cutting prescription drug pricing socialistic, just a few minutes later, the senior senator, Republican senator from Iowa, took the floor and endorsed the very same policy. He said he was in favor of cutting prescription drug pricing for senior citizens. The two of them obviously are not talking with one another, or certainly not agreeing on the basic issue. Here's what we think. We believe the pharmaceutical industry in America is a great industry and very profitable. We believe that they're spending more money to increase their profits, not as much on research as they are on marketing. And what do I mean? Turn on a television station and try to avoid an ad for a drug. They're on constantly. And really, they spend a lot of money, the industry does, on those ads. More money than they spend on actual research for new drugs. What are they trying to do? They're trying to convince the American consumers to ask for certain drugs when they go to the doctor. So they got to work overtime to try to get us to the point where we can spell Xarelto and write it down on a piece of paper and go to a doctor and ask for it. And people do, and it works. And the money they spend in advertising works. There are only 2 countries on earth that allow television advertising for pharmaceutical drugs: the United States and New Zealand. Most every other country says those decisions should be made by medical professionals. Consumers can't know the whole story, can't know the medical aspects, every aspect of a drug. It is best to leave to the professionals. But the American pharmaceutical industry sees it another way. If they can educate, inform, and motivate American consumers to ask for drugs, many doctors will prescribe them without a battle, and the cost of health care goes up. Blue Cross Blue Shield, based in Chicago, Illinois, told me that the push behind increases in health insurance premiums for families across America is the cost of prescription drugs. They are so expensive. And so we're trying to, on the Democratic side, come up with a plan that reduces the cost of prescription drugs for Americans and American families, particularly for senior citizens. It's long overdue. Senior citizens who can't afford their prescriptions don't fill them or take half a dose when they should take a full dose for their good health in the future. We want to reach the point where these pharmaceuticals and prescription drugs are affordable. Right now we have what I consider to be a fair deal between the Veterans Administration and the pharma companies. They negotiate the prices of these drugs so that our veterans get the benefit of that negotiation. Incidentally, the pharmaceutical companies also have to negotiate with governments in other countries. Canada, selling exactly the same drugs made in the same place in the United States, charges a fraction for most drugs over what's charged to the American consumers. What's the difference? The difference is the Canadian government said, we're not going to let you exploit our customers in Canada. So they keep the cost of American drugs lower than what we pay in the United States. There's no fairness there. If we were going to have negotiation to bring pharmaceuticals down to an affordable level in Canada, we should do it in the United States. The bill being pushed by the Democrats and opposed by the Republicans would do several things. It would say that Medicare can negotiate prices for drugs. That will help senior citizens, and it will save our Treasury money. It also says that we're going to limit the amount of out-of-pocket expenditures that seniors will face under Medicare to $2,000 a year. That's a real break for a lot of people who are struggling to make ends meet among our senior citizens. We also say that if the pharmaceutical companies dramatically increase the price of drugs, they will be subject to a penalty. There are conditions for that, but we're trying to say to them, you can make a profit, but don't try to capitalize on that profit every single year by raising the cost of drugs. What we're talking about are actual family concerns for the affordability of life-saving drugs. The Democrats are for it, the Republicans oppose it. They have said it's socialism, it's trying to make a buck, or whatever they want to characterize it, I don't know. They ought to sit down and talk to some of these families. In fact, they ought to talk among themselves. When a Republican senator took the floor yesterday and agreed with our position on pharmaceuticals. So I would say to the senator from South Dakota, he can continue his campaign for the Republican dream of making tax cuts for the wealthiest people permanent. I want to be part of the Democratic aspiration to make life more affordable, particularly for seniors and those who need affordable drugs. I ask consent that this following statement be placed in a separate part of the record.
Without objection.
Today, the Senate's going to take up the CHIPS Act of 2022. It's critical to our economy and national security. It'll provide billions of dollars to boost our domestic semiconductor manufacturing industry. In 1990, the U.S. produced 37% of the world's semiconductors, 1990. Today, 12%. Semiconductors are used in everything from vacuum cleaners, refrigerators, cell phones, cars, fighter jets. And the ongoing global shortage of microchips has led us to supply chain constraints on goods, higher prices, layoffs, and a great dependency on foreign suppliers. For generations, my state of Illinois has been a leader in auto manufacturing. This includes companies like Stellantis, which has a plant in Belvidere, Illinois. Unfortunately, this plant has had to force shutdowns and layoffs in recent years, not because they lack customers, they lack chips. The global shortage of semiconductors has forced Stellantis to slash its workforce by more than 70% over the past 3 years. A similar story at Ford's Chicago assembly plant, repeatedly forced to stop production and lay off workers because of a shortage of chips. This isn't just an Illinois problem. U.S. automakers are building an estimated 3 million fewer vehicles than projected this year because of semiconductor shortage. The global chip shortage and resultant slowdown in auto manufacturing has driven up the cost of cars and trucks. A new car costs 17% more today than a year ago. Talk about dealing with inflation. When it comes to the cost of vehicles, you're dealing with the shortage in semiconductor chips. Across America, layoffs, closed production lines, long waits and high prices for cars, appliances, and other basics are evidence of the urgent need to invest in our domestic manufacturing industry and domestic production of semiconductors. If we fail to make these investments, American workers and consumers will pay the price. And this isn't only about our nation's economy, it's also about our nation's security. Many U.S. defense systems and platforms rely on foreign-made chips for their performance, and semiconductors are particularly critical for the next generation of defense technology. Most of the chips that power U.S. defense systems today are made in Asia. Think about that for a minute. We are dependent on Asia for the chips that we need to keep America safe. We've seen what a pandemic can do to supply chains. Think about how military conflict could end up with supply chains, global supply chains, in danger. Imagine if China, for instance, decided to deliberately withhold microchips from a nation to weaken their national defense. Rebuilding America's microchip production is about defending our nation and our allies in a dangerous world. Now, I understand some have concern about the subsidies in the bill, framing them as corporate giveaways. It's true that many of the chip makers who would benefit from this bill are profitable, or they've moved production overseas despite receiving previous federal funding. But in this bill are incentives to bring microchip production back to the United States, and they are absolutely necessary for us to compete with other nations that are trying to lure chip makers away from the U.S. The bill also includes guardrails to protect and promote production in the United States, such as prohibiting the manufacture of certain chips in countries of concern like China. Ultimately, this bill makes strategic investment to boost our domestic supply chain, counter the threat posed by other countries like China and Russia, and help American consumers. I urge my colleagues to pass the CHIPS Act without delay. Mr. President, I'd like to make one last statement on the record.
Without objection.
It's not every day we get to say this, but this week we have a chance to make history in the land of Lincoln. Soon, the Senate will vote to confirm Nancy Maldonado as a U.S. District Court judge for the Northern District of Illinois. If confirmed, this eminently qualified nominee will be the first Hispanic woman to serve as an Article III judge in Illinois. It marks yet another proud accomplishment in our efforts to build a judiciary that really reflects America. Born in Skokie, Ms. Maldonado has practiced law for more than 2 decades, earned her A.B. cum laude from Harvard and her J.D. from Columbia Law School. After graduating, she served for 2 years for Judge Ruben Castillo, who served on the court which she has now been nominated. In the years since her clerkship, Ms. Maldonado has dedicated herself to defending the rights of working people as a plaintiff's side employment law litigator, and throughout her career, she has continually answered the call to serve our state. In the early 2010s, she worked as Special Assistant State's Attorney in Cook County to investigate fraud. In 2018, our State Attorney General appointed her to serve as consent decree monitor in 2 employment discrimination cases. Again last year, she was appointed to serve as Special Assistant Attorney General to investigate consumer fraud. She was also confirmed by the Illinois State Senate to join the State Police Merit Board, a role in which she's worked to ensure members of law enforcement who protect and serve our community are treated fairly. With such impressive credentials, it's no wonder that Senator Tammy Duckworth and I enthusiastically support Ms. Maldonado, and that the American Bar Association rated her well qualified. Given her extensive experience and long record of service, she'll be an asset to the Northern District. I hope all of my colleagues will join me in voting for her confirmation, and I yield the floor.